Beliefs. What is the definition of truth? In simple terms, the truth is what one human being wants to believe is true, right? In other words, if we think something is true, it is. Beliefs and what we wish to believe influence our thought patterns, determine our associations, and shape the values that we adhere to in our short-lived lives. I have an emphasis bar. It says, if you think something is true, it is. Here is something interesting. A rather surprising percentage of people believe that the historic 1969 landing on the moon was a hoax. That's one small step for man, one giant load of bullcrap from mankind. We have a picture of Ed here, and he's saying, was that the iconic July 16th, 1969 quote? I forget. To my knowledge, I could be wrong, because the opinions in this entire book are completely unsubstantiated, but I am pretty sure that moonwalkers brought back over 2,800 pounds of moon rocks from the multiple Apollo missions. With very special government clearance today, you can view these non-Earth-like looking rocks for yourself through a pane of glass at the Lyndon B. Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. Before Neil Armstrong sadly passed away in 2012, it was possible to speak with the man who uttered the famous words himself and ask him, what was it like to land on the moon? Buzz Aldrin, the second man on the moon, described the whole not shutting the door behind him thing in a recent interview that can be found online. He joked that he was afraid to close the door behind him in case he locked the two of them out on the moon. A 24-hour locksmith was really hard to find in 1969 that covered their rural route. The American flag is still there, laying down in the dust. Why did the Stars and Stripes flag topple over? Possibly from the wind? No, it was from the thrust of the rockets from the Eagle spacecraft as it blasted off from the surface. Mr. Aldrin did not stick the pole deep enough in the lunar soil. The astronauts learned from this error in judgment, and American flags from all the post-Apollo 11 missions are still standing, casting dark, regular shadows on the moon's white surface. How can these neat facts be from an event that wasn't true? I have just tried to lay down a pretty persuasive argument about whether the moon landing really happened. However, if some of you reading this chapter still don't believe humans landed on the moon, maybe Elon Musk, that eccentric billionaire Tesla CEO, SpaceX guy, will one day conduct weekly tours around the moon, exposing strong evidence of truth for all our naysayers to see. As a matter of fact, a few years ago, NASA flew a space probe close to the moon to see if the tire tracks left behind by the final Apollo missions' lunar rover vehicle wheels were still there. Because actually, there is no wind on the moon. The space probe's camera zoomed in on the area where the astronauts drove around, and photographs showed that the lunar rover vehicle tire tracks are indeed still there. The world-famous astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson said recently in a YouTube video that it would be more complicated to fake a moon landing with all the documentation and cover-up propaganda necessary than to actually orchestrate a mission to fly to the moon itself. However, with all this information out there, our non-believers will still say, it's all fake, it's all staged. They'll suggest that the rocks were made in a laboratory. The landing was filmed in a large NASA soundstage studio. They will claim Neil Armstrong never used to like talking about that day because he knew it was a lie. They advised, don't listen to Buzz Aldrin. He is out of his mind. Actually, that last statement could be true. Buzz has always been a bit strange. I do understand and realize that a moon landing can mess you up mentally. Trying to find fulfillment the rest of the way in life. Can you imagine achieving the highest pinnacle of success in your career when you were only 39 years old? And what you supposedly did is all a stranger ever wants to talk to you about? It could get very annoying. My question for him would be this: Buzz, how do you have more hair now than you did when you were 30? Just kidding. At the time of this writing, I think the man is over 91 years old, and hats off to him. He is a great American and a great man. What about me? Screams the third astronaut, who was stuck in the command service module and didn't get to go down the ladder. I drew the short straw, damn it. My name is Michael Collins. No one ever asked me about that day. I was there. I digress, but here's my point. If someone wants to believe something is true or isn't true, the proof and the facts don't matter. They will simply believe what they want to believe. Meaning, if Elon Musk's future rocket ship has a live TV feed from a high-definition camera approaching the Sea of Tranquility area in SpaceX's maiden voyage to the moon and flies over the American flag sticking out of the dust, some naysayer will say, if they have the technology now to fly to the moon and back in a weekend, they have the technology to act like their fancy cameras are zooming in on old flags on the moon. On the subject of truth, sometimes you just can't win. In ancient civilizations, before the wisdoms of Pythagoras and Plato were shared with the world, most people believed the earth to be flat. Explorers thought their ships would fall off the horizon if they sailed too far. There are still members of the Flat Earth Society around the world today. Can you imagine if one of these Flat Earth members also had aspirations to become an astronaut and made it to the surface of the moon? Surely this would change their mind, wouldn't it? Now, this is our first illustration, and it shows an astronaut, probably one of these flat earther guys, that has made it to the moon, and he's looking up to the earth. And he says, still looks flat to me. Now, some people believe the moon is made of cheese. Actually, I don't think anyone out there really believes this nonsense, but let's keep going with this whole moon theme. And allow me to stir the pot a little. Most Christians will get really uncomfortable when you show them information that suggests our moon was formed between 4 and 5 billion years ago. Or explain to them that our sun is also billions of years old, and there are some distant galaxies, including our very own Milky Way, that were formed around 14 billion years ago. In certain folks' books of religious choice, words state the heavens and earth were created between 6,000 and 200,000 years ago, depending on which version one is reading from. This range of numbers indicating the age of the universe are a bit off from 14 billion, don't you think? Some Christians will resist and rebut by saying, well, how do we trust that scientists know how old everything is? We don't believe them. Or they may say with their minds made up, no matter what, not everything in the King James Bible or the New Testament is 100% accurate. They're not science textbooks. But we know that God created everything, and that's that. Consider the pot stirred. You know I couldn't write about beliefs without bringing this topic up. What do you think about all this, Ed? It's a picture of Ed here. It says, where do we go from there? The facts simply don't matter. Now, some folks do not believe that the Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. To this point, let's reference something we have all seen. Quite often, on the side of the highway in a mountain cutaway, we can see layers of sedimentary rock from different time periods of the Earth's history. These geologic structures take a lot of time to form and show evidence of ancient seabeds containing fossils of tiny sea creatures telling a story from a very distant past. Coal miners also know that the coal they pull out of the hills that pays their bills didn't form overnight. God forbid, no pun intended here, they find another fossil of an ancient dinosaur, let's say a T-Rex like the famous Sioux that supposedly roamed the earth way before man got here over 65 million years ago. Some folks that believe things in a certain way know that these discoveries do not complement their perceived truth, questioning the carbon-14 dating process by asking, how can a T-Rex be 65 million years old when the entire universe is less than 200,000 years old? Scientists believe that a giant asteroid wiped out all the dinosaurs. The collision with Earth is theorized to be as powerful as 10 million atomic bombs and change the Earth's surface temperature and oxygen level. Modern-day scientists have pinpointed the exact impact area in Mexico and have found traces of the element iridium deep below the rock's surface. Iridium can only be delivered to Earth by meteorites and asteroids. Theologians subscribe to the notion that man and beast existed together on Earth and claim that the Great Flood buried all God's creatures left behind, including all the dinosaurs, in mud and silt, explaining why ancient fossils were preserved so prevalently. I read this information, thought about the timeline history, and asked myself, does this mean dinosaurs were invited to the Ark by Noah? 2 by 2? Comedic pause. They were kind of big, weren't they? Now we have our second illustration, and it's a good one. If you own the book, you'd see a dinosaur trying to get onto the Ark, and Noah stopping a brontosaurus with his staff, puzzled how he's going to get him on the Ark. I can imagine the confusion about logistic space assignments when the 30-ton, 2-story high brontosaurus species was waiting in line to get onto the Ark with his common-law wife. Noah looks up from his ramp in bewilderment and cries, can we get some baby versions of these two? Not gonna work. He then notices a gigantic brachiosaurus and diplodocus couple waiting patiently behind them and calls his assistant over, waving his staff. Hey, Charlie, go tell those others waiting in line they're too similar, too big, and they're not getting on my Ark today. Charlie relays the sorrowful message to the brachiosaurus and the diplodocus couple, and they walk away distraught with their shoulders slumped, realizing that today is the day of their extinction. One of the males is shaking his head, dejected and mumbling about the realization, man, today is going to be a real shit day. With a large thunderclap, the rain begins to pour. This all sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Whenever a person discovers a difference of opinion in facts, I think we should read more about both sides to see where everyone is coming from, don't you? Most of the time, though, when religious folks hear a difference of opinion in creation facts, they like to run their concerns by a man of God for assurance and explanation. The pastor or bishop usually tells them, "Now remember, sister, what we said about staying away from non believers." The religious leader and authority figure also has a vested interest in the strength of his congregation, since his family had recently purchased a brand new $1 million pad in the country. His family has been truly blessed, and this blessing comes with a pretty hefty mortgage payment. After the sensitive situation has been diffused, the pastor asks his loyal lady church member as a gentle reminder, "Are you bringing any new recruits to the cookout? And will you be tithing the usual 10% this week, dear?" There's a picture of Ed here, and he says, "Oh boy, that's bad. That's just not right." You might be right, Ed. In a middle-aged man's opinion, I have found that it is next to impossible to convince people to read information that contradicts their perceived truth. Why would anyone ever want to take the time to do that? No one wants to believe that they might be completely wrong about something. Their human ego would not accept the truth. Here is one more spin on truths and beliefs, and we will wrap this one up. Less stirring the pot and a real life scenario, I promise. Have you ever met an individual that thinks the world is out to get them and thinks that we are too? Sometimes we might be this person's supervisor or boss. No matter if our intent is to truly help this type of individual, somehow this person twists all the facts around in order to prove that we are indeed out to get them, thus validating their own theory. After a surprise situation comes up with this personality type, our minds can't even comprehend how they would have reacted to the situation until they do. We try to tell them they have everything all misconstrued and that we didn't mean it that way, but the person will not listen. Their mind is made up, and there is nothing we can say that can convince their hard head otherwise. So what is my point in all this? What do I personally believe about the moon landing and dinosaurs? I may have left some clues, but it doesn't matter. My point is this. If we ever meet someone who has a passionate difference of opinion to us, and we show them all the facts that prove that we are right and they are wrong, after our conversation, that person is probably of the same opinion still. It is a futile waste of our time, and we should move on. Our energy is wasted in trying to convince them into our way of thinking. Once in a blue moon, no pun intended here again, on very rare occasions, another individual may sway others, depending on their level of salesmanship and fact credibility. How'd I do? Laugh out loud. Folks, in 1969, man landed on the moon. Unsubstantiated advice from middle-aged men about beliefs. If we have a strong difference in opinion from another about a strong belief, don't start the debate. Just smile and walk away. Am I right about all this? Or am I just half right? This concludes the beliefs chapter in unsubstantiated advice about life from a middle-aged man. Please search for the next chapter on YouTube, Decisions. Thanks for listening, everybody.